Hi, I'm Betty Long, and welcome to the Lighting Your Way podcast. During Season 2, we are delving in deeper to the amazing lives and stories of nurses and other healthcare professionals from around the country. We will also be talking with a few of my nurse advocate colleagues at Guardian Nurses, and on occasion, even some real live patients. You'll get a behind-the-scenes peek at the healthcare system, as well as get advice on how to get the best care when you or a loved one is a patient. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a nurse staffing crisis that is forcing many U.S. hospitals to turn to travel nurses to give them the help they need to handle the crush of patients. Some trace the start of travel nursing to the late 1970s, when extra nurses were brought to New Orleans to care for the influx of people during Mardi Gras. Since then, the number of travel nursing agencies and contracts has grown. And now we have the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that the current nursing shortage will get worse by 2025. So opportunities for travel nurses are not likely to slow down anytime in the near future. Today, we talk with Abby Heitner, a travel nurse whose clinical specialty is pediatric critical care. Bitten by the travel nursing bug 4 years ago, she hit the road in California and hasn't looked back. Well, okay, maybe she's looked back once or twice. In the early days of the COVID pandemic, when pediatric units were not busy, Abby explains that there were few travel assignments to be had. She worked for about 6 months as the COVID team leader for HBO in Hollywood. Unrelated to her nursing and COVID expertise, she is an avid world traveler, athlete, and adventurer. Throughout our conversation, you can feel Abby's passion, not just for travel, but also for her role as a nurse. Abby Heitner, welcome to the Lighting Your Way podcast. Thank you very much for taking time to join us. You're talking with me from Seattle, Washington, I think, right?
That's correct. I am.
Yeah. And you are, hopefully you fared okay in the recent torrential rains out there. I think that was yesterday.
I just finished drying off. It's been a long process, but we finally got some sun today.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. It was, our nurses out in Seattle said it was brutal. All the rain and mudslides. So glad you're okay. So let's get started talking about you. And before we talk about travel nursing, which is why you're joining us tonight, tell me about what led you to your career in nursing.
I think that it was written in the stars before I was ever born. My father is an emergency room doctor, and my mom was an emergency room nurse. And growing up, I was just captivated by their conversations over the dinner table as they would tell about, what happened at work. And of course, they're, using these words that I didn't understand at the time. But it was a bonding time actually for myself and my parents that we would watch the show ER that was on TV way back when. Right. My parents couldn't help themselves but jump in and say, "Oh, that side rail's down," or "That wouldn't be like that." They wouldn't do that.
Yes. I'm kindred spirits with your parents. Yes. Okay. So that was, so then you just, did your dad want you to go into medicine? Was he jealous that you went into nursing?
No, actually, he was a big advocate for me going to nursing. I started out pre-med when I went away to college, and I was so fortunate to study abroad in Spain. And when I was abroad, I realized that this idea of spending the next decade of my life in school was not my dream. And I think that I was going into medicine for the wrong reasons. So when I came back, I switched majors and switched to nursing, and I have truly never looked back.
Wow. So your mom must be very proud of you.
I hope so. I hope she's listening to this sometime. But yeah, I hope so.
Yes. And I'm sure your father is as well. Are they still actively working?
They are not. They're both retired.
That's great. Okay. See, there is retirement in the future. My friends say nurses never retire, but they just go per diem. But I think that there are some instances when people do retire. So you are genetically predisposed to go into nursing. But what got you interested in being a travel nurse?
I was so lucky to work in a hospital that we had travel nurses, and we had many travel nurses come through, and seeing their lifestyle from the outside, getting to talk to them about the cities they've experienced, the places they've been, the idea of taking time off between contracts, just the versatility and the flexibility that came with traveling. It was on my mind for, to be honest, 3 years before I took the leap. And and it was something that I'd entertained, but never knew if I would be good at it, if I was independent enough, if I was brave enough. And one day I just actually was having a bad day at work, and I pressed submit on an application, and I got approved the next day. And I said, all right, well, we're doing this.
All right, off and running. So that begs a question. So not every nurse is cut out to be a travel nurse, just as every nurse is not cut out to work in the ER, right, or in the operating room. So besides packing light, tell us what you consider to be qualities of someone who can be a successful travel nurse. You mentioned independence. What other qualities do you think lends himself well?
Being very flexible. It's not just traveling light, but also approaching every new situation, every new city with an open heart and open mind, talking to a lot of strangers.
I bet.
That's the best way to make friends and meet people. And just also, really being able to go with the flow. It's a new house every 3 months, a new place to live, a new bed to lay your head, new people to work with, a new team. It requires a lot of, just rolling with it and, counting the good with the bad and just, really realizing that you're on a huge adventure.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So a lot of people, and I think nurses are included in this, we think that travel nursing means extended assignments to exotic places like Hawaii, but that is not necessarily true, and certainly not true during COVID. And these days, it might mean you're working at the hospital 3 miles from your house. So can you share the more common, more accurate definition of travel nursing, the one that you fell in love with when you hit submit?
Absolutely. It's a combination of both of those things, actually. So it's not always the exotic tropical locations, but it really is truly you decide where you go. So you 100% have all of the say in which city you end up in, which hospital you end up in. You can, as a travel nurse, you can chase money and choose to go to the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, and work in a rural, less desirable location and make more money because they are looking for staff and they're a little bit, more just in a pinch and they really need someone fast. Or you can choose the way that I have done it is that I really want to choose it based on the city and the location and the season. So I have chased seasons in my 4 years of traveling, and I have spent my past 4 winters in Denver, Colorado, so that I can ski and be in the snow. And I have spent my summers in California and now Seattle. And I have just tried to line up my life with where you want to be when.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. And looking downfield will be another quality, right? To look at the seasons and figure out where you want to be. Wow. Yeah. Have you ever been, when you say, you've gone to Colorado for skiing, not ever in Alaska or kind of the colder climates like that? You've stayed away from that. It's mostly about the outdoor sports.
Yeah, exactly. The outdoor adventure is what drives my life and then drives my travel nursing city location.
That's great. And so these assignments are typically, 12 weeks?
13 weeks.
Oh, 13 weeks. Okay. And then
Yeah.
do you often get extended or is that just like 13 weeks and you're out of there?
I've actually only extended once. All of the rest of my assignments have all been the 13 weeks, and then you're ready to move on to a new location.
Okay.
It's not always, it doesn't always work out that you can extend. Sometimes, if the need continues at the hospital, the option is there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, after 13 weeks, it's okay, great. Well, I got into traveling so that I could experience more places and give cities a trial run, as I call it. I
Okay.
don't know where I want to live eventually and where I want to set down roots. So travel nursing has just been the most beautiful exploration of different cities and getting to test them and see, what do I want to live here? Can I
Yeah.
stay here longer? And it really fuels me to just keep seeing more of the United States and moving on to the next place to explore more.
Wow. So you said you've been doing it for 4 years, and where did you start in nursing? Where did you where was your first assignment, or not assignment, but your first job?
My very first job ever was in California. I started actually in the neonatal ICU,
Great.
and I then worked my way north to still Southern California, but a little bit north to Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And I switched to pediatrics. And then from pediatrics, I cross-trained and eventually fully switched into the pediatric ICU. And
Wow.
that is how I've been traveling since, has all been in the peds ICU.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what, I think there's a misconception among nurses. I know for sure that travel nurses get the worst patient assignments. Has that been your experience?
It has not. I have every hospital I've entered, it has been a core staff that they're inviting travelers in because they are short staffed. They are, having higher acuity. They need help. And so when you come in as a traveler, I've always truly been met with open arms of, thank you so much. You're here to help us. And
That's right.
you are making, work a little bit safer, a little bit easier, a little bit better. You're a new face, new energy. And I just try to approach every assignment in that manner that I am there to help. I also realize I'm temporary. So, if I get a rougher assignment on one day, that
Right.
everything in that realm is temporary for, the good and the bad.
That's great. No, that's a great attitude for the folks to offer you, right? Because I think it always hasn't been that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
when we think of travelers too, I think they're also, besides of course the adventure and the chance to experience other cultures and areas of the country, there is the ability, particularly now during the COVID-19 pandemic, to receive more financial compensation. But besides the salaries, what other benefits are there? Do you get housing? Do you get, like, what other benefits do you get?
Yeah. So your pay breakdown is made into three different areas. One is your hours worked at the hospital. Another sector is your meals and per diem that they
Okay.
account for of gas money or so getting to and from work. And
Right.
then the other area is housing. So
Ah,
they are happy to provide housing for you. And if you do take the company housing, then they don't give you that third of your paycheck.
okay. Got it.
So it's very common among travelers. Primarily, people choose to find their own housing, and then they give you a stipend in order to aid you in that process.
Oh, that's great. So you're in Seattle, so you found your own place to live in Seattle.
I did, yes.
Lucky you, because
And
that
that
is it's a
that
hard.
process can be difficult. So you don't always, it's part of the truths and the lies about travel nursing. You're not living in beautiful, luxurious homes all the time. You
Right.
do get to decide where you live, but when you come to a place like Seattle where housing is so hard to come by,
Yes.
and
Yes.
especially temporary furnished 3-month lease housing,
Right. Exactly.
you
Right.
you sometimes find yourself in less desirable places, but it all works out. And ultimately, I'm not here for where I live. I'm here for everything outside of my home.
Right. And it's part of the adventure, right? It's part of the
Yeah.
Part of the adventure
Yep.
of figuring out where to live. So most of our listeners may not know that nurses do require professional licenses in the state that they practice in. And getting that license means obviously sitting for an exam right after nursing school. And when you pass, you receive your nursing license in that state. So how do you as a travel nurse address the licensing requirement, right? Like you've worked in California, you've worked in Washington, you've worked in Colorado. How does that work?
Well, I get fingerprinted a lot is the short
Ah,
answer.
okay.
um, I apply for each state individually, which is
Ah,
quite a tedious and expensive process.
oh, I bet.
Um, there is such thing as a compact state license that if I had taken my initial examination called the NCLEX in a compact state, I believe now that there's 30 or 32 states throughout the United States that have joined the compact licensure.
Okay.
However, I initially took my examination in California and they are not compact.
Oh,
So that means that I get to apply for each state one by one, and
oh,
I get fingerprinted. I submit a lot of information. I submit paperwork to California to have them submit paperwork to whatever state I'm applying to.
wow.
It's it's a
Wow.
long, not arduous, but it's a long, tedious process of lots of paperwork and lots of fingerprints.
Right. And plus lots of CEUs to maintain that license.
Absolutely. Yes,
Wow.
every state requires their own CEUs, and then it requires lots of reminders on your phone and in your planner of
Right,
when things are due to
exactly.
expire.
It's due. Right. Did you mention organized back in the qualities of a successful travel nurse? Organized and tech savvy. Organized and tech savvy.
Right. Exactly.
So I guess the good news in all this is that a nursing a patient is pretty consistent, right? Heart disease in California looks like heart disease in Alabama, and cancer in Washington is probably cancer in Colorado. So, can you talk a little bit about what is different and what challenges you've faced in going from hospital to hospital?
Absolutely. Every hospital, of course, has their own policies and procedures, and
Right,
there's no, that phrase that everyone can do something a little bit different.
right,
So even something as simple as, priming IV tubing, that every hospital has their own way of doing it, of how to keep sterility, how to do a central line dressing change on a patient. So there are
okay,
those kind of, more day-to-day tasks that
mm-hmm.
are vary slightly. And then I guess big picture, every hospital is set up just slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get your meds, where you, complete your charting, things like that.
Right,
And
right,
then also the mentality at different hospitals vary. So some hospitals are really focused on teaching and on incorporating, if you have fellows or residents and, as they're doing their training as well as student nurses. And other hospitals focus a lot, especially in the pediatric population, on family-centered care.
right.
So this has been very different in different regions, and it's been
Interesting.
surprising, actually, of how willing different hospitals are to incorporate the families into their child's care and
Wow.
how much they allow them to almost lead and dictate their child's care.
Oh,
That's been
okay.
surprising and different.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have a couple of peds nurses on our guardian nurses team, and their experience at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is that it's very family centric. And they often remark about how, quote, the adult world sounds like a sci-fi movie. The adult world is much different, right? So the pediatric world, at least at CHOP in Philadelphia, is much more geared toward including parents and siblings of the patient. And you just assume that that's what it would be like everywhere, but I guess not.
Yeah, absolutely. And the places that I've been that do function in that manner have been some of my favorite places.
Right.
Having, it is a whole family that is involved, and you get to see them at their highs, their lows, and really getting to connect with families as well as patients, and including them every day in rounds and in all of the processes that we're taking.
It sounds to me in 13 weeks, you have a lot to figure out. Those first couple of weeks must be pretty stressful for you. New computer systems, new, medication charting, new this, new that. Wow. Good for you. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's like everything. With practice, you get a little bit better at it. But my first year of travel nursing was not always pretty.
That's okay. Look at you. You're 4 years in now. You're good. You're a veteran.
I'm a veteran now. Now I don't cry after my first day anymore. I'm good to go.
That's good. That's good. See, it's progress. Good for you. But think about, no, seriously, Abby, think about all the stuff that you've learned and how much you've changed, and probably could go into any situation, right? And handle it, because it's a lot of challenge to walk into a different hospital every 13 weeks or so and learn all of those things and still function and take care of patients and safely, right? That's a wonderful accomplishment. You should be proud of yourself. Really.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So you've mentioned you're a peds nurse, which, as Robin tells me on our team, she takes care of little people. So, but during the early days of COVID, children were not being infected or hospitalized. So that led to a very interesting gig, from what I understand from our earlier conversation. So can you talk a little bit about your work during the early days of the pandemic?
Yes, I, exactly as you mentioned, couldn't find a travel nurse job. Most of the pediatric and pediatric ICU units were very low census, if not closed, which was wonderful for them. And I wish that was still the case. And so it actually rerouted me through a friend of a friend. I became the COVID compliance supervisor for Warner Media. And more specifically, I became the on-set COVID nurse for a main HBO TV show, and then went on to do the same job for a feature film.
Wow. So what did that job look like? I'm sure it's a lot different than the new hospital. What did it look like?
It was very different, and that was also quite the learning curve. We were dealing with basically a very new virus. We didn't know how it was transmitted at the time. We didn't know if gathering, in groups, even staying 6 feet apart, was safe. We didn't know so many details that we know now, fast forward 2 years that we're into this pandemic, and it was pre-vaccine. So everything was scary, everything was new, and the film industry is a very large industry in Los Angeles and makes up for a lot of people's jobs and well-being and how they support their families. So after quarantine was lifted a little bit in Los Angeles, they decided that they were going to get back to work and bring everyone back and start filming again. But they wanted someone that was outside of the film sector, and there comes me. So actually the very first TV show that started filming again in Los Angeles was my TV show that I was on. So I was one of the first people serving this position.
That's
and
great.
I didn't have that much guidance. So it was definitely a lot of figuring it out on the fly.
Yeah.
But the role ultimately kind of just formed and came to be that I was keeping track and supervising all of the COVID testing. So everyone that was on set was tested 1 to 3 times per week.
Wow.
And I would respond if we had a COVID positive of doing contact tracing, figuring out who was in close contact, who needed to quarantine, if that person if their symptoms were more severe, if they needed to be hospitalized, just really trying to react and first and foremost, keep COVID off of our set. And then if COVID did come into set, how we respond and how we go from there.
Wow. Well, yeah, because no one knew, right? It was the early days. We were all making it up, right? We were all trying to figure
Yeah.
out what to do. So how long did you have that role?
So I actually was in that role for 6 months.
Okay. So back to your mom and dad looking at at ER with you. Did you tell them why that you wanted to make sure that the bed rails were up? Did you tell the producer of the shows, listen, my parents?
Yes, actually, the feature film I was on, I was able to be kind of function in that capacity as well. There were a
Great.
few different medical scenes, so I was able to insert a fake IV and make sure that it
Nice.
was, put in appropriately, would be, in the antecubital vein and be in the right place. And then actually there was a medical scene, and at the time we were trying to limit new people coming onto the set and trying to just keep our core group. So they put me in the movie.
Atta
And
girl, atta
I am
girl.
actually in the film
Nice.
as a nurse.
Oh, that good. How long did you train for that role? No, that's great.
I've been training for a decade now.
That's right. Were you part of the credits? Did they list you in the credits?
They will. The movie hasn't come out yet. It'll be
Oh,
out next
okay.
September,
Great.
but I will be in the credits.
Oh, congratulations. That's great. Wow, that's
Thanks.
great. That's good.
It
That
was
is,
one of those pinch me moments where you never know where nursing can lead you.
yeah, for sure, right? I think that's great, and I think I'm proud of you for doing it correctly. Your parents will be proud of you. So when you look back, on your travel career, what is there a favorite hospital assignment that you've had, and why, or how long were you there? Tell us. Is there anything that really resonates with you that was one of your favorites?
Yes. Well, Denver, since this will be my fourth winter coming up, that I will be headed there after Seattle.
Okay.
I think they're doing something right. So I not only love the outdoors there, but I have enjoyed one hospital in particular that actually has a shared pediatric ICU and their pediatric cardiac unit.
Oh,
So
okay.
usually those two units are split, and so this hospital that I've been fortunate to work at for several years has it combined, and it's been just wonderful to be able to learn more about baby hearts and
That's great.
all of the things that can go right and all the things that can go wrong in utero and how they're forming.
Oh, that's great. Do you, when you get back, I'm sure they remember you and welcome you with open arms. Abby's back. It, it's snow
It
season.
does feel it feels like a home away from home for sure.
Yeah. Do you try to stay at the same place if you can? Like an
I
apartment?
I do.
That's great. Yeah. So at least you feel like you have some continuity, right? Something familiar. Because I imagine, I
Yeah.
guess when we've traveled for guardian nurses, and it's been sometimes for extended periods of time, you get used to the place that you're staying in, but then, you want to go home. So where's home for you?
Well, I have a storage locker in Santa Barbara. So that I guess is as close to home as it gets. But I am also very fortunate that my partner lives in Los Angeles full time. So
Okay.
I'm able to go and stay with him, and I have a wonderful group of friends and a wonderful network there in LA. So
That's
that
great.
feels like my truest home.
That's great. Okay. All right. So I asked you about your favorite hospital assignment. Do you remember your worst hospital assignment?
I could never forget it.
Ah, okay. You want to tell us?
Yes, it was my very first assignment. It was the one that I pressed submit to and then had a panic attack of,
Oh, right.
oh gosh,
Okay.
I'm really doing this.
Yep.
And I didn't wander too far from home for my first assignment. I just headed a little bit south to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So I did my first contract in LA, and it was a very busy, understaffed and undersupplied hospital.
Oh.
And I was working straight night shift,
Oh.
and it was rough on all accounts. The patient assignment ratios were higher than is, expected. Usually in the ICU, you have 2 patients is your maximum.
Okay.
Oftentimes there you would have 3, sometimes 4.
Oh.
And it was scary. I was ready to give up after that first one. And everyone tells you when you become a travel nurse, if you've packed up your things and you've loaded up your car, you've got to give it at least one more chance.
Okay. Wow. And you did, and the next assignment was better.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. When you have patient ratios that feel unsafe and you're a traveler, I can't imagine anything worse, because it's a new hospital. It's all the things that you've mentioned. And then to have 4 patients in a pediatric ICU would be pretty scary.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you're leaving Seattle in a few weeks and you'll be off to Colorado, Denver?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you ever take time off during the year just to chill out?
I do. I will actually be taking about a month and a half off between Seattle and Colorado.
Oh, great.
Just to relax and to travel. I'll be going on a scuba diving trip and traveling to Mexico with my partner and just having some fun time. I think that's the most important part of, just being in a pandemic, is realizing also that you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself.
Right. Good for you. Yeah. Oh, and it's funny to me that you're a travel nurse, but then when you're not traveling as your job, you want to travel for fun. Clearly, there's a theme running through your life.
I spend a lot of my income on plane tickets.
Yeah. You must be in the $1 Million Mile Club on whoever you're flying. So once bitten by the travel bug, sounds like you have been, with all this adventure and opportunity, do you envision, I guess, becoming a staff nurse at some point? And if that happens, where do you think you'll end up? You mentioned you're still kind of browsing different cities. What's on the top 2 list so far?
I guess, that's the ongoing question of how do you give up this, in my mind, I think of it as an ideal life. Right. It's obviously, difficult to create community when you're always on the move, and to really find, a yoga studio that you love, or a certain restaurant that you become a regular at. You miss out on those aspects for sure. So I think that so far my leading 2 cities are Santa Barbara and Denver, Colorado.
Ah, okay. Okay, for all the reasons that you've mentioned. You have to go to your you have to go to your storage locker. It misses you.
Exactly.
So do you think, how long do you think you'll be on the road again? I mean, to stay as a travel nurse?
I think I have a few more years ahead of me that I would ideally like to fulfill, a few more stops that are high on my list, and some more adventure to be had before I really kind of settle down and put down some roots.
Okay. Right. Put your suitcase away.
Yes.
So when I do have to ask you that, I have friends who are, one's a travel nurse, and they have certain requirements for their luggage. They're not allowed to have more than 2 bags, and it's very funny to me because that's their whole, it's their whole world. Do you have, what bags do you have certain bags that you take on each of these assignments, like a big bag for clothes, or because I'm sure you wear scrubs, right, to work?
I do.
Yeah. So it must be easy to pack your work clothes, but like, what does your luggage look like when you're going off to, say, Denver?
It's so funny. I have such a system now. I have it down that I could probably pack up and unpack in if I'm really focusing, under an hour.
Wow. For a 13-week assignment? Wow. That's
everything
great.
has a place, and everything has an assigned bag. So I have, I think it's 4 suitcases that I travel with that fit in my car. And when I go to pack up, everything has an assigned place. And
Okay.
it goes where it fits, and then zipped up in the car, that also has an assigned place, and off we go.
Wow. Okay. And now, so when you're traveling for fun, are you just as skilled a packer, or are you kind of last minute?
Oh no, I hem and haw over what I'm going to take to travel for fun.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's a whole different thing when it's work. But when you're going to go to Mexico for scuba diving, you're thinking, maybe I'll take my flip-flops. Maybe not.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I really do. I appreciate a good packing assignment. When a colleague and I came out to Seattle for a couple months last year, we had 2 bags each. We were proud of ourselves. And that
Wow,
was
that is
for,
very impressive.
yeah, that was only, well, it was only for 10 weeks, 11 weeks. It was it was right as COVID was blossoming. So we got home mid-March. All right. So what would you like our listeners to know about travel nursing? You've told us a lot, which I really appreciate. It was very entertaining. And I actually learned something about travel nursing that I didn't know. So thank you. But is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners, both nursing and non-nursing?
I would say that if you are a nurse and you've been considering travel nursing, you should take the leap. The worst case scenario, you can always probably go back to where you came from. And most people take that leap and they never look back. And so it took me 3 years to do it. I would strongly, strongly advise just giving it a go. You can meet new people, experience new places, learn how different hospitals do different things, really widen your understanding and your experience as a nurse. And then if you are not in the medical field and you've been listening to this podcast, thank you. And I guess my message to you would be, if you ever meet a travel nurse, ask her if she wants to get dinner. She might be in a whole new city all alone and probably spending a lot of meals at first alone. So just reach out,
That's
offer
great.
a hand and a friendly face.
That's great. Right. Yeah. Take you out to a place where the locals go, not where the tourists go. Well, I hope people take you up on that next time you're in Denver. And I think that when you settle down to a hospital, you're going to bring a lot to that assignment, Abby. I think that you have a lot of skills that I certainly appreciate as, leading guardian nurses. But congratulations to you on a successful career in travel nursing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And happy trails to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and continue doing the wonderful work that you're doing. It's so wonderful, the program that you've also set up, and just always inspires me to see all of the different avenues that you can take nursing.
Yes, exactly. It's a wonderful career. And make sure you tell your father that over Thanksgiving.
I will.
All right. Take care, Abby. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you have any questions that you would like us to address in a future episode, please email us at podcast@guardiannurses.com. That email again is podcast@guardiannurses.com. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us this week. You can find the Lighting Your Way podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, YouTube, Spotify, and Stitcher. If you liked what you heard, tell a friend and leave us a review. You can learn all about Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates on our website, guardiannurses.com. So until next time, find some joy in your life, pet all the good doggies and kitties, and remember to tell your people that you love them. Take care.